This is Matthew Cratter from Trader University, and this morning I want to answer the question, is this a bottom in Bitcoin? Obviously, Bitcoin's been very volatile the last 24 hours. I've gotten a huge volume of panicked emails, panicked comments, and messages. And the really interesting thing about this is nothing significant has happened in terms of Bitcoin analysis or Bitcoin news. This seems to be just a positioning thing where we got a lot of people long at the beginning of the month, and now the market is quote unquote crashed back down, all the way back down to where it was trading on January 3rd, roughly. We retraced to levels that were last seen on maybe January 2nd. But this is not a big drawdown. You see bigger drawdowns in stocks. It's very rapid, it's very volatile, and it's coming off of the highs. But the really strange thing about this is I can't find anything to be worried about. If you take a look at, this is a Twitter account I like to follow that tracks the stock to flow model. This is the valuation model I've been using to arrive at a fair value for Bitcoin. This model is predicting Bitcoin going anywhere from 100,000 to 288,000 later this year. The current model price is at 30,219. So we obviously got well above that when we were trading in the 40,000s, and last night we dipped below 30,000. Now we're a little bit above the model price. Bitcoin is very volatile, as you all know. We all know this intellectually. Once you have a position in it that's significant enough, you will feel it even more. This is something that's been happening a lot in the comments. There's this famous exchange that went on a couple weeks ago, very long exchange with H.H. Vex 2018, talking, he basically sounds like a gold bug, had a lot of problems with Bitcoin, and then downloaded my free book and said, I see the outlook on your arguments. I'm now going to build a position in Bitcoin. Unfortunately, he decides to return yesterday and taunt everyone saying, how's your portfolio doing? I hate Bitcoin. Why did you convince me to buy it? It's a bunch of garbage, blah, blah, blah. And my response to him really was, I don't care if people invest in Bitcoin. Someone who can't handle the volatility, who doesn't understand it, who hasn't really done the research, it's probably better that they don't own it, because they're just going to end up losing money like H.H. Vex. And so just wanted to put that one on there for the record. There are lots of famous tweets like this. Here's one from Nick Allen that's quite famous about Bitcoin crashes down to $2.70 a Bitcoin. So glad I didn't buy in that mess. This has been happening since the beginning of Bitcoin. People who sell and think they've caught the top always turn out to be wrong. And the really funny thing about Bitcoin is it's one of these things you cannot win with. People who don't like it, who don't want to buy it, are just never going to buy it. And that's why this channel is not about convincing people to buy it. It's more about documenting what I'm doing with it and providing my thoughts out in public so they can be critiqued, etc. I obviously think my arguments and Plan B's model are very convincing. It doesn't matter if you do or you do not, as long as you invest in Bitcoin in a responsible manner. Don't put too much into it, and make sure you do your research first. These are the classic excuses that I just hear again and again in my comments. I'm not buying Bitcoin because it's gone up too fast. I'm going to buy it on a pullback. Of course, when that pullback comes, the same people are saying, I'm really glad I didn't buy it, which means they never were going to buy it anyway. I'm not buying Bitcoin because it's crashing. I got a lot of those messages last night. And then there were the messages from late last year, or maybe the third quarter of last year, when Bitcoin was sort of just dead in the water after the halving. I'm not buying Bitcoin because it's not going anywhere. And then you have people like H.H. Vex talking about, I'm not going to buy Bitcoin because it's too volatile. I'm going to stick to gold, which is an inferior money technology. If you're enjoying this video, I'd encourage you, before I forget, to please like and subscribe. So the main reasons that Bitcoin's been selling off, as far as I can tell, there's this article which has been circulating around. I addressed this briefly in some of my comments yesterday and the day before. This is it's not a reliable argument. It's been debunked by many people. I made a video about a week ago about Bitcoin and Tether. You can go back and watch that. You can also read Dan Hild's dissection of this paper. points out that just the many flaws in terms of the methodology. The author of that article, he conflated and didn't know the difference between spot, basically things like Coinbase, the spot markets for Bitcoin, and the derivatives markets, which are the options and futures markets. And he used various data sources that conflate those same derivative volumes, etc. He used CoinMarketCap for Tether issuance, which has incorrect data, etc. But the really interesting, you can go through and read this article and all the problems with this anonymous article. The thing that I thought most interesting about this article, which I hadn't really thought about before, was that there's this debate: is Tether fully collateralized by U.S. dollars and by assets? It may or may not be. I'm not a fan of Tether, and I'm not a fan of the whole ecosystem that surrounds it. But this was an interesting point that Dan Hild made, that if Tether was found to be worthless tomorrow, in other words, maybe it's only backed by 40 cents worth of dollars for every $1 of Tether. Tether's a stable coin. It should be $1 equals 1 USDT, 1 Tether. But if there was a problem, what would actually happen is Tether holders would try to get out as quickly as they could. And the easiest way for them to exit Tether, obviously if there's a problem with the Tether company, I forget the official legal name of it, they would they're not going to be able to go there and exchange their Tether for dollars. So what they would do instead, if people were panicking about Tether, is they would rush to convert all of it into Bitcoin. So if Tether were to fail, which could happen, it's kind of a shady company behind it. If it were to fail, Bitcoin would actually spike in price as $24 billion worth of Tether tries to find a home in Bitcoin. It's an interesting hypothesis. We'd have to see it happen to know that it's true. But all this Tether stuff, people who fall for this, I don't blame them, but if you have any experience understanding how exchanges work, and in particular how Bitcoin works, that it trades on all these different exchanges all around the world, and there's this arbitrage between them. There's the real thing that's manipulating Bitcoin is the Federal Reserve printing more dollars, and also the huge inflows of money from Wall Street. These completely overwhelm any contribution from Tether. In my previous video on Tether, I allude to a bunch of articles that apply statistical analysis to show that there's just no correlation or possible causation there. So this Tether stuff, I'm not going to cover it anymore. It really is a huge distraction, and it's not something that I'm worried about. There are much bigger problems that could happen with Bitcoin. We could have an EMP attack. We could have all the countries of the world get together and ban it. None of these things are likely, but those are things to worry about. Some exchange printing up Tether and allegedly using it to pump Bitcoin. People have been trying to do this for a very long time. They don't understand why Bitcoin is so valuable. They don't understand the problem that it solves in terms of creating a new, better form of money. And so they come up with outlandish theories that try to explain why Bitcoin runs up so much. If Tether were really pumping Bitcoin, how come it pumped it in 2017 and then it stopped pumping in 2018 and then it started pumping again in 2020? It makes no sense at all. And people had similar theories about how Amazon and Apple and Tesla stocks were being manipulated. And yes, you can manipulate assets or stocks over a short period of time. But when something has gone from $1 to $30,000, crashed many times and keeps hitting new highs in spite of that over 12 years, you cannot manipulate an asset for 12 years or more. Unless, of course, you're the Federal Reserve and you can just keep printing money. But the Fed is not a threat to Bitcoin. In fact, the Fed is going to help and has been helping drive Bitcoin to ever higher and higher prices. I think another thing that was contributing to the decline in Bitcoin were these comments from Scott Minard at Guggenheim saying that he thinks Bitcoin has peaked and is going to retrace back down to 20,000. That being said, he still thinks that Bitcoin is going to 400,000. This sort of got buried somewhere. I'm not going to attribute motives to him, bad motives. You never know, though. I'm not sure why he'd be talking down Bitcoin. Maybe he thought there was Maybe he wants Guggenheim to be able to accumulate some of it. Maybe he's just looking out for small-time speculators. That being said, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to be making these short-term calls. I have no idea where Bitcoin peaks or bottoms in the short term, and neither does Scott Minard. He can obviously add some money to it and do these huge flows, etc. But no one really knows the short-term path of Bitcoin, and that's very important to realize. My views of Bitcoin are long-term views, and I still am extremely confident that we're going to hit $200,000 by the end of this year. I know that sounds a little bit insane. It sounded more insane when Bitcoin was at 10,000. Now it certainly seems doable. You can go back and watch my video from yesterday about Janet Yellen attacking Bitcoin if you're worried about that particular FUD point. I found an interesting link to her testimony to the Senate Finance Committee on January 21st, 2021. And she's much more, what I argued in that video yesterday is that Janet Yellen basically works for Wall Street. Wall Street loves Bitcoin, and so she's not going to kill Bitcoin because then she has to go after people like Guggenheim, Scott Minard at Guggenheim, etc. She's not going to do that. She's not going to get billionaires mad at her because she works for the plutocracy, the kleptocracy, which is Wall Street. And so it's interesting in this Senate testimony to see that she does say that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have the potential to improve the efficiency of the financial system. And so her basic take is how to encourage cryptocurrency use for legitimate activities and curtail their use for malign and illegal activities. This definitely doesn't sound like someone who is about to ban all cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin. Finally, lots of headlines about double spend that people alleged occurred. You obviously can't have a monetary system or a form of money where I can take the same $10 and go to two separate stores and spend it twice. If Bitcoin ever did have a double spend event, it would destroy faith in the currency, and it would be catastrophic. I'm not technically capable enough to make these arguments and to understand why double spend did not occur. There was basically a clickbait article, I believe, on Cointelegraph, and it's been trashed by all of the smarter names in Bitcoin, including Andreas Antonopoulos, who's been in the Bitcoin space for a long period of time. You can watch his YouTube video about how double spending did not occur. Adam Back saying there was no Bitcoin double spend. I'm not a huge fan of Antonopoulos because he has been sort of shelling some altcoins over the years. Still a very smart guy. Adam Back, more of a Bitcoiner, maximalist, and more my sort of guy. And he's saying that there was no double spend in Bitcoin. If there actually were a double spend in Bitcoin, if there had been a flaw in the software code, first of all, it would have been discovered over the past 11 years. Second of all, Bitcoin would not be trading at 32,000 now. It would be at 2,000 or 3,000 if there were really a problem like this in the code. So this was a clickbait article. Obviously, this is a very a space that's very difficult to understand. I don't understand all the technical ins and outs. And so it's very easy to scare people and try to get a lot of clicks by writing articles like this or writing articles about double spend. But they're not, none of these events that happen, the Yellen, the double spend allegations, or the Tether, these are not real problems for Bitcoin. This seems to be just a flip in terms of sentiment. Too many people were leveraged long, and we got a shakeout on things that were not really news. Now, holding Bitcoin from here to 200,000 or 500,000 or $1 million, it's going to be difficult. It's not for people like HH Vex, who 2 weeks ago says he loves Bitcoin, and then 2 weeks later he panics and calls everyone idiots, even after doing his own research. These are the kind of people who have very short time horizons and will never make it on the journey. If you think today was bad, just wait till we have a really bad day. This was normal Bitcoin volatility. It's going to be we're actually going to have very scary events going forward where it's hard to predict what these will be, but they will be much more severe in terms of in terms of their impact, we could see much greater crashes in Bitcoin of 40 to 50% when we get some really bad news. Hard to know what that will be. But you have to understand where I'm coming from. I'm a Bitcoin true believer. I've studied this, and I think this is the best investment of the decade. So this is one that I'm prepared to hold on forever. I've allocated the right amount of money to it, such that if it works, I'll make a lot of money. And if it doesn't work, I'm not going to be homeless, etc. So this is one that Bitcoin is so volatile that I don't believe you can trade it with a stop loss, at least with a large amount of money as I have invested in it. And so this is something that I'm prepared to hold all the way down to zero, because we could get a spike down to zero. It could spike down to a penny and then come roaring back up to 40,000. Anything can happen. This is a free market. This is a truly free market. It's not a manipulated market like all the other financial markets. And it's very easy to move around. It can be manipulated over very short periods of time. You can come in with $1 billion and dump it, try to short Bitcoin, and you can make it go down. That's fine. You can also go to the ocean and take a giant beach ball and push it underwater for about 15 seconds, and then it's going to pop back up. Bitcoin is very similar. It is attracted to its stock to flow price. And this model price, if the model holds, is headed to 100,000 to 200,000 later this year. So this is how I choose to hold it. I'm only investing money into Bitcoin that I can afford to lose. And I would suggest that you do the same if you decide to invest in Bitcoin. After checking with your financial advisor, I would just completely stop checking the price of Bitcoin. If you understand the long-term thesis, and if you're actually in it for the long term, if you're in it as a trade, that's fine. Just make sure you know where your stop loss is. I don't think that's the best way to make money in Bitcoin. When something's going to go up 50x to 100x to 200x, you're not going to be able to out-trade that. I enjoy trading momentum stocks. Bitcoin, I think, is a buy and hold asset. And so if you're really in it for the long term, and if you really are, stop checking the price of Bitcoin on your phone every 5 minutes. And especially when it's crashing, don't torture yourself. What I did yesterday is I just turned off my phone and computer. I went for a hike with my wife and kids in the woods. If you have the luxury to be able to do this on a weekday, I would encourage you to do it on days like yesterday, because there's no reason to torture yourself. I'm obviously human. I feel I watched these big losses in my Bitcoin holdings. Now, they were sort of paper losses in the sense that I'd made a lot of money in Bitcoin over the last 30 days, gave a lot of it back yesterday, still way above my average price of entry. But there's no reason to watch Bitcoin. There's many more productive things you can do with your day, and I highly recommend spending time in nature. The Japanese have this practice called forest bathing, or Shinrin Yoku, which means basically you spend time in the trees. And even if you go to Tokyo, they have these parks that have fairly dense trees where you can relax, and just staring at the green of pine trees or deciduous trees, it lowers your cortisol levels, it lowers your stress levels, and also all of the fragrances that are released, especially by pine trees, the terpenes like pinene, for example, are very relaxing and rejuvenating. So don't forget to spend time in the non-digital world. It's very important, and it helps you to become a better Bitcoin hodler. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.